Hey fellas, it's Lagoon and... Oh my god. This is the Nintendo Entertainment System, also known as the NES. It was Nintendo's first home console, if you don't count Pong consoles, set the video game industry on the path to what it is today, and, well, it makes a good paperweight. The NES is one of the most iconic video game things of all time. If you ask your dad what this was, he'd know. If you ask him what a PS5 was, then he'd probably think it's an air fryer. This gray brick of a console was the center of so many people's childhoods, and a lot of those people would probably say that it is the best console of all time with the best games of all time. But is that really true? Today I want to look back at the NES to see if it was really as special as people think it is. But first, a little history. Most people already know this, but the NES is actually the localized version of the Japanese Famicom, or family computer. It is basically the same as the NES, but with a different design and some exclusive features like a mic on the second controller and the ability to use the disk system add-on, which I won't be touching in this video. Nintendo wanted to bring this puppy to the West, but that was going to be difficult, specifically in North America. To keep a really long story short, the video game industry over here was in a pretty shitty place. Atari and all of the other consoles at the time were being flooded with garbage games and consumers were getting really frustrated. This led to that whole video game crash thing I'm sure you've heard about. Basically, people here were skeptical of anything related to video games after wasting too much money on shovelware Atari 2600 games. This naturally created problems for Nintendo, who wanted to put out a video game console after all this shit went down. Nintendo's plan to avoid skepticism was to market the NES more as a toy than a game console, even going as far as bundling it with a robot I don't have and a firearm. This, coupled with a redesign that appealed more to audiences outside of Japan and their Nintendo Zero quality shtick, made consumers more willing to try games again. And so the NES was released in North America in October of 1985, and the rest was history. Let's look at the console in depth though. Like I said earlier, this thing is basically just a big gray box with some sleek 80s flair. It's interesting to me that back in the day, tech was colored gray and beige, and that was what people associated with futuristic. Can anyone from the time sound off in the comments as to why that was? I wasn't alive at the time, so I wouldn't know. The console is simple. Power and reset buttons, various connectors on the back, a big flappy cartridge slot, 2 controller ports, and a weird removable rectangle on the bottom that I bet most of you didn't even know was there. This was actually an expansion port, but went unused as the Famicom disk system never left Japan. Every aspect of the design of the system fits together perfectly, making this big hunk of pure 80s that looks great, even if the top of mine is faded and has a yellow tint. I say this was mine, but it's actually my dad's console that I've basically stolen and claimed as my own at this point. That explains why this thing has faded. I don't think my dad really cared about protecting this console from sun damage. Anyways, enough stalling. Let's hook this baby up, turn it on, plug in a controller, and fire up the old CRT. Jesus Christ. For some reason, without a game, it does whatever the hell this is, so let's make that stop and grab ourselves a game. NES cartridges, also known as game packs, spelt like this, are these adorable gray 8-track looking guys. Art on the front and labels on the side and a little notch to help you grab them. To insert them into the console, you slide them in and push them down. It's super satisfying. And bam, there we go, we have an actual game screen and not the eerie green abyss that you see when you die. As you might be able to tell, the screen has these weird wavy lines going through it. I think that's the result of something to do with the capacitors or something on the inside. I don't know, I'm not going to try and fix it because I'd probably just make it worse. Most of the footage of NES games you'll be seeing in this video won't be recorded off of original hardware anyway, as if I tried to record directly from the NES, it would probably look like unshaved ballsack. But before we actually get into the games on this system, let's talk about what we'll be playing them with. The NES has a lot of strange ways to control games. The default is this, the NES controller, and it is as iconic as it is rectangular. The design on the front fits perfectly with the vibe of the console. We have a really great D-pad paired with some wonderfully clicky buttons, and squishy start and select buttons smack dab in the middle. These in particular don't feel that great, but like, I'm not going to be mashing these very often, so them not being as satisfying to press as the other buttons isn't a big deal. This controller is almost perfect and does everything it needs to do excellently, but the overall shape is a bit of a problem. See, this thing is literally just a rectangle, no smooth edges or anything. The sharp edges can really eat into your hands if you're gripping the controller tightly or playing for long sessions. This was actually remedied with the top loader NES redesign that was released later. The controller there had a different shape and was smoother around the edges. If you want to learn more about that console though, go watch my video on budget console redesigns. Aside from the sharp sides, this thing is classy as hell and super fun to use. But what if you don't want to use it? Well, lucky for you, I have this! Change your mind yet? This is the NES Advantage controller, and oh my god, it's a beast. Look at how much bigger than the default controller it is. It is insane. You know, I used to love this thing when I was younger, but trying again, yeesh. I just couldn't get the precision I wanted from this in games like Darkwing Duck or Mario. The stick on this feels good for arcade ports like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, but for anything else, it's kind of a mess. I just couldn't pull off the moves I could with the traditional controller. The buttons on this are also nice and chunky, but they aren't laid out in a way I like for most games. With the original controller, I can hold one button down and rock my finger to press the other. With this, you need to have one finger on each button, and it doesn't feel as good, even if pressing them individually feels super satisfying. This thing also has various other options, like turbo buttons and a slow mode, which pause buffers in games. This controller is literally named Advantage so that it can give you an advantage over the competition, but using this just makes me want to use the normal NES gamepad. Well, at least it has two controller plugs that you can cover all the ports and not let your opponent play. Ah yes, my real advantage over my foes, not letting them play in the first place. This controller is just kind of a clunk fest, but when I was testing them out, something insane happened. So I have two of these for some reason, and out of nowhere, they decided to become possessed. I was trying to play Mario, and it was going fine until for some reason my OCD brain decided to flip the player switch back and forth. Normally this just makes you lose control for a second and then you get it right back, but somehow this led to a cavalcade of insane happenings on both controllers that I just had to document. This controller is so unbelievably borked that I cannot jump high enough to get over this pipe. And I've been trying. And this one is kind of borked too, because for some reason I like switched it to player 2 and switched it back just because I wanted to play with the Switch. And for some reason it made the A button start and Mario would swim weird and I couldn't continue the level, and now I'm just now on this one I'm just stuck here. Help! Help! Okay, look. This is the other one. That was the one that was messing up just now. This one, it pauses with the jump button, and then, like, jumps twice. I can't... Why is it like this? What did I do? Uh-oh. Looks like I died. I seriously doubt this is any fault of the controllers themselves, though. I think they are just so old and well-worn that they decided to wig out on me and cause crazy shit to happen. Last observation with this, I swear. But this is the one where the A button was being the start button. If I'm hovering over Mario, and I hit A, it loads Duck Hunt. What? 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 But even if these controllers weren't possessed by Lucifer, I don't know, I just don't really like them anymore. They're too clunky for their own good. Luckily for me though, I can put them out of their glitchy misery with the official NES gun. This is the NES Zapper, a basic light gun used in games like Duck Hunt. The tech in here allows you to interact with the game screen by just pointing somewhere and shooting. It is surprisingly accurate for its age and a blast to use. The trigger is a bit rough on the fingers, but the click is so damn satisfying. There are more controllers and accessories out there for the NES, some way cooler than others, but that could be for another video. I am ready to leave this traumatic experience behind and instead talk about the games. The NES's library of games is super vast. We have sports games, platformers, RPGs, adventure games, puzzle games, racing games, basically everything you could have ever wanted at the time. While a lot of these games haven't aged well at all, some of them have aged perfectly and they're still so much fun to go back to and play today. The original Mario trilogy, Kirby's Adventure, Yoshi's Cookie, NES Tetris, all these I can go back to at any time and have a blast. However, like I said, there are a lot of these games that have not aged well at all or were just straight up garbage even when they originally released. NES games are super fun to go back and try out, but there's so much of this console's library that just consists of pure slop. Shitty cash grabs that were never good in the first place. Even some of Nintendo's own first-party games have not aged well, like the original Metroid, which is basically impossible to play without a guide. It's a great controlling game, but god is it confusing. All these games have their rightful place in video game history, but going back to play them today can be a chore. A lot of NES games I just pop open on Switch Online to fill around for a couple of minutes, and then I close them and never have the urge to play them again. At the very least, they've aged way better than Atari games, which just like, what the hell is even going on here? Even with a big heaping pile of garbage in the system's library, I still love so many NES games. They can be hard and even unfair, but there's something about just seeing how far you can get in them and learning new tricks that's so much fun. They are simple, sure, but that simplicity makes them easy to play and replay over and over again. I'm just glad we live in an era where I don't have to pay $40 to get these games. Like, imagine paying $40 or more for Rygar. I'm not saying it's a horrendous game, but like, you get what I mean. But this all has me thinking, how did the NES get so many games on it. Like I said before, this thing had games of all kinds released for it. In addition to that, there was no real competition. Sure, there were other consoles like the Sega Master System, Sega's 8-bit offering and predecessor to the Genesis, but I have a feeling that some of you watching this don't even know what that is. The reason for Nintendo's unrelenting reign on the video game market in this era was actually way scummier than you think. You see, back then Nintendo had a strict set of rules for putting your games on their platform. The most relevant to this discussion being the exclusivity rule. If you put a game on the Nintendo Entertainment System, that bitch was going nowhere. You could not put a game that you made for NES on Master System for 2 years after the game released. That meant no multiplats. In addition to this, there were so many rules and regulations on how you were supposed to manufacture the cartridges, having to buy the shells from Nintendo directly for a while before the FTC stepped in. If you want to learn more about this, I will have this great Medium article that I used for research in the description of this video. But basically what I'm trying to say is that Nintendo set up the NES to be the only viable console. The NES sold more than the competition, so you wouldn't want to miss out on your games being playable there. But if you did put it there, it would have to be exclusive, meaning the NES had far more exclusive games and sold more than the competition. It was this scummy cycle that gave Nintendo a monopoly over the industry. And yes, that did mean more NES games, but at what cost, you know? A funny part of these publishing rules was that Nintendo limited the amount of games companies could release on the console each year, in order to ensure that the games were high quality to avoid an Atari situation happening again. But we still got garbage galore on this system, so it didn't really help now, did it? So yeah, Nintendo did a lot of scummy shit back in this era. Like I said, go read that Medium article, they go into more detail about it. But that doesn't mean that the NES itself is a bad console. If anything, these scummy practices made it a better console with more games, as weird as it is to say that. The NES and its games are just plain simple fun. Sure, we have seen so much better come out since this era, but there is something so pure and to the point about NES games. They feel so different from anything we see today, even games trying to mimic the NES style, and it makes returning to this library from time to time super enjoyable. It's not my favorite console, nor is it anywhere near the top 5. Hell, I think the people that think gaming objectively peaked here are nostalgia-blind old farts, but I still love this thing to death. I can't not love the NES. No matter what year it is, how old I am, or how outdated the games feel, the NES will always be fun, and I look forward to revisiting it for the foreseeable future. Even if I'm scared of it after what happened with the controllers, I think these things are haunted.